Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Third Half Podcast. I'm Jared Kleppel along with Gerard Iscani, your host tonight. Podcast by the FCS Live team. Grab some popcorn, grab a seat, join us live in the comments on YouTube. We'd love to get to your comments later on in the show. We are going to have Lansing City player Conrad Gonzalez on tonight. Gerard, I'm excited for that, but we have some other stuff to get to. What are you most excited for in the show tonight, Gerard?
Well, one of the things I really wanted to talk about is the game last week, Midwest against Jenga. I had the opportunity to be there in person. It was a really exciting affair and amazing opportunity to witness, and can't wait to talk about it.
And that's actually where we're going to start, but before we get to that, just want to let you know, we are going to be highlighting that massive game this weekend where Lansing City heads to Detroit Imperial for just possibly the biggest showdown of the year yet.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about this later, but this is going to determine playoffs right here.
It could be a win or go home situation for these two teams. So more on that. And of course, as I mentioned, we are going to have Conrad Gonzalez of Lansing City. Unfortunately, Matt Alishari, coach for Lansing City, wasn't able to make it tonight. So Conrad Gonzalez stepping up, and we're excited to talk to him and get some insight on this Lansing City team as they prepare for, as we mentioned, probably the biggest game of the year for them. But first, let's talk about Midwest hosting Jenga this past week. It was on Saturday. What was most interesting to you about that game, Gerard?
Really, I know we want to talk about court size, but for me, the most interesting aspect was the creativity from Midwest. We spotlighted Daniel De Leon as the player of the match, and it really was his ball skills. It's one of the things we talk about with Davide Depoce and Detroit Imperial on that smaller court. We talked about he might be the only player in the league that could maintain the ball. If you remember the clip from last week where he took on 3 different Olay defenders. Daniel De Leon did basically the same thing, but even in a more advanced way to actually create a goal with a phenomenal assist. And he did that time and time again, even in times when it didn't end up in goals. So it was really great to watch and see that creativity and flair.
And we actually have a couple of actually, don't know if De Leon scored, but chances he created were big time in the game against Jenga, and we have a couple of those coming up in a little bit. So get your votes ready for Goal of the Week. We're going to show some of those, and one of them, I think I know what my pick is. I think maybe it's the same pick.
Yeah, I mean, he had 3 assists, right? And so when you think about the Goal of the Week, it's not just about the finish. It's about the build-up, right? It's about the play in its entirety.
Is there a word for 3 assists like hat trick?
Hat trick of assists.
A hat trick. There probably. I feel like maybe there is. Maybe some of you guys in the chat know what that is. But so that was he definitely had a huge impact on the game. We're going to show some of the clips in a little bit. For me personally, what I thought was interesting is it's the story that I think people are starting to catch. I know I'm catching it. Jenga's just having some struggles on the road. And I know we've talked about the travel is tough, right? Every team that traveled to them had to deal with, sometimes a shorthanded roster, this or that or the other, just the what it takes to go through a drive like that, to get out of the van. I've been there before. You get out of the van, and now you got to play in a couple hours, sometimes less. It's just a mentality difference than the rest of the league. So, we know that can be a big part of it, but they have continued to struggle on the road.
Yeah, really, we see the exact same scenario play out for the teams visiting Jenga. Every team that Jenga has played at home, the game has been completely different on the road. And so it's not just Jenga and this opportunity with traveling. It's literally every team in the league. So it's been really interesting to see really that dichotomy of game, right? Like almost a complete disparity from one game to the next, whether they're home or on the road.
Well, that was one of the things that I thought was interesting about the struggles that they've had on the road is it seems like you're talking about a disparity. Mm-hmm. It seems like it's worse for them on the road, right? So you think about a game like Lansing City. Lansing City at Jenga, I think it ended 2-4. Mm-hmm. Barrage of shots for Lansing City as they have all year.
Well,
right?
I know where you're going with this, and I would agree because it has a lot to do with the court size. So
Yeah.
all of these games that they played on the road, the court is bigger, right? And so when you think about what is Jenga's strength, their strength is the defensive structure. And when you play on a wider court, when you play on a longer court, it's a lot more difficult to maintain that defensive structure, and it's one of the things that we saw, and that's what made Midwest successful this weekend, is they were able to break down Jenga's defense with some creative play.
One thing that's interesting is Jenga does have two different courts. We've seen them play the game against Lansing City and against Detroit Imperial at home. They were both on a larger court, and actually I believe – maybe I have to double check with my sources, but I believe it's not that far off from a court like Lansing City or Olay. However, that other court that they played, Olay at home and Midwest at home, though that one was definitely one of the smallest that we've seen. I don't know the comparison, but it definitely seems very similar to Canton Solid in Canton, Michigan. So, definitely something that, Jenga, I think they only have one more match, if I'm not mistaken.
They do, and it's against Midwest.
It's against Midwest away.
Yeah, so I don't know if we want to talk about that now, but they're sitting on 12 points. They're playing Midwest. If we are to expect anything out of that game from what we saw earlier in the season from Midwest, Jenga has 15 points. That's where they're sitting at. And so when we think about how important the game is between Lansing City and Detroit Imperial to get into that fourth playoff spot, you're going to be looking at 15 points minimum.
Well, let's turn our attention to the goals of the week. So go ahead and put your vote in the chat. We're gonna show. I probably shouldn't say put the vote in yet because you don't know the goals are. I mean, if you want to blindly vote, go for it. But we have a few different options here. We're going to show them on stream, and then we're going to create a poll and give you guys a chance to vote. So let's get those pulled up. And while I do that, we talked about Daniel DeLeon earlier. Many of these chances were created by him.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch him and to see the creativity in person. It is one of the biggest attractions for futsal is just the environment. We had a lot of fans here. There's a lot of excitement and energy. And so when you check out this first goal right here, watch the footwork and the spacing and like the movement from Daniel DeLeon to create the opportunity.
So this is option number one for goal of the week from the Midwest and Jenga game. Let's take a look. Midwest currently has the ball in the back, and they are going right to left on your screen here. There's DeLeon with it right there, the touch inside. He finds Garcia.
And you just got to love the movement from Midwest of understanding. So Isaiah Meyer there cleared out the space in the middle of the lane to open up that pass. So they're really all on the same page, and it's really great to see them working together. And what a great finish right there.
Jorge Saldana's captain for the Midwest United side was ready for that one. A great touch to deflect that one. So that's option number one. We're going to pull up option number two here. This one, so I have to say, I guess I wanted to say I'm sorry, but I'm not really sorry, but it's a bummer that we aren't able to feature any of the Jenga goals on here. Unfortunately, they're all Midwest goals. The Midwest goals were just, they were better in this game. So let's take a look at this one. Here's Jenga with the ball in the back to start with. And just a toe poke screamer to the top shelf.
That placement is incredible.
Eduardo Mendez, I believe, number 9, if I'm not mistaken, just takes it and from the top of the arc, blast. So that's number 2. Let's get out number 3. 4 options on the goal of the week this time around. So this one's going to be Midwest in the back. Here's DeLeon on the near side of your screen. He gets the ball and he goes to work.
Yeah, just for me, the ball movement and the skill that's required to be able to get in a position to make that pass truly makes the entire play.
Yeah.
And then the finish is outstanding. Another great finish. But for me, what sets this apart is just that that's so difficult to be running full speed, moving from your right to your left. We had Roger Strazen there trying to poke the ball away, but De Leon was able to keep it just out of his reach.
Yeah. So another one, the one about that last one, you talked about that move around Roger Straz. I mean, just that those touches so quick and so fast in the pace of the game. Let's take a look at this one. This is your last option for goal of the week. Take a look here. Midwest starts with it in the back. Leon Garcia with Daniel De Leon, and just a nice diagonal. Oh.
Yeah, that's beautiful too. Another great pass, but then the fancy footwork at the end to create the space and the opening for the shot.
Straz and Tommy Sawa both there on the fake from Leon Garcia. Just a bit of beauty there and brilliance, and you can't ignore that diagonal either.
Yeah, you know what is really awesome watching back that replay again is he did the ball roll in such a way that it was it looked like a shot attempt. So he had enough power and force with his foot before doing the ball roll that it looks like it's going to be a shot. And then he does the ball roll, creates the space, open net.
So there are your 4 goals to vote on. We're going to get to work making a quick little poll there in the chat. So you can vote for your goal of the week. And coming up in just after the break is going to be Conrad Gonzalez of Lansing City is going to join the show and talk about Lansing City, his journey with Lansing City, and the growth that Lansing City has seen from the young players over the season, including goalkeeper Ethan Castaneda, who was phenomenal in the last game that Lansing City played hosting Jinga, and also his take on the upcoming game when they go to Detroit Imperial this week. And that's all coming up right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
Committing a crime so you can try to escape from prison. Bad idea. Go into the pod escape room to play an escape game with your friends. Great idea. Test your skill as an astronaut in outer space. Find Santa in Save Christmas. Or take a vacation to an abandoned island. Just don't get stuck there. The Pod Escape Room. Learn more at thepodlansing.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Third Half podcast by the FCS Live Team, sponsored by Ally Marketing and the Pod Escape Room. I'm Jared Kleppel along with Gerard Iscani. We're about to welcome a very special guest from Lansing City. But before we do, a couple of notes. We saw a comment in the chat from Jake George confirming that the big court in Jenga is a 40x20. So I know we were kind of talking before the break. You felt like you had to rescind a couple of things.
Yeah, and one of the things you did point out is the game against Midwest in Ole were both on the smaller court. And so it really stands what we talked about, seeing a disparity in the game. So both of the games against Midwest and Ole, home and away, were completely different.
Yeah,
right?
They really were.
They were. And the other game that's really important in this too that we're about to talk about is the difference with the Lansing City. So even though the court size was the same, in Cincinnati and in Lansing, the court size is the same, completely different game, but for a different reason, not because of the court size, and we'll get into that now.
Yes, we will get into that now. So we are going to welcome on our special guest for today, which is Conrad Gonzalez of Lansing City goalkeeper. Conrad, thanks so much for coming on the show tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we got to talk a little bit before you came on, before we went on air, just a little bit about your journey getting into futsal. So tell us, how did you get started with this? How did you get connected with Lansing City?
Yeah, futsal for me, especially growing up as a kid, we didn't play futsal. And so I grew up in Southern California, so we played a lot of indoor soccer. And then I lived in Colorado for a while, and this kind of the same thing. And I was just here, and I saw that there was a Lansing City futsal thing going on. I wanted to find out about it. Probably 2017, 2016, I started playing some pickup games with the guys that were playing. Met Jeremy, and then when COVID went down, he gave me a call one night and said, "Hey, will you come train with us? We need another goalkeeper for training." And yeah, so since then I've kind of been sticking around with the team. Gone through a couple different phases, right? So he's a training goalkeeper to getting to play a little bit to coaching and back to playing again. So. It's been really fun, and I'm really blessed to be able to be here and be a part of this program.
Well, one of the things I'd love to learn a little bit about is the difference from being a goalie outdoor compared to being a goalie in futsal. Like, how has that been for you?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's been a good transition because just the smaller goal and the tighter spaces kind of highlighted more of the things that I was better at as a goalkeeper in outdoor. So reflex saves and those kinds of things. There's a little bit of transition difficulties that I know I went through early on, just techniques that I still struggle with. That when I'm coaching some of our younger goalkeepers, I'm like, hey, this is a place where you should not go down hands first. You should be making a kick save. I said, so don't watch me because my natural instincts are to be doing this. But I think really over the last year or so, especially last year, I didn't play very much. I had ACL surgery. And so just becoming a student of the game, I think, and then taking those things. And then some of it just translates, right? The reactions, getting used to being hit. You're involved in the game a lot more. So there's not as long of periods where you're just trying to mentally stay in a game when nothing else is happening. As a goalkeeper in futsal, the game's happening all the time. So.
This the culture of Lansing City seems to be something that it gets talked about a lot. We had Jack Fisher on the show a couple of weeks ago. He talked about that. Tell us a little bit about, your experience being on the team. I know you've been in a few different roles, goalkeeper, coach, a little bit of both. This year, primarily goalkeeper. Tell us a little bit about your experience on the team and what it's like to be a part of the Lansing City culture.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really impressed me about this was coming and getting a chance to learn the game, but also the emphasis, I think, on actually playing futsal as opposed to just playing soccer inside on a smaller court, taking away some players. And so that really intrigued me, kept me coming back, wanting to learn more, and just falling in love with the intricacies of the game. Right, so that culture thing for us, especially this year, we've been trying to drive it home, has really been the driving factor much more than even winning or losing games. Is will we play futsal in a proper way? Are we going to work on getting better, all of us individually, which would mean as a team we're going to work on getting better? Are we going to work for each other? Right, I think is big for us. And is important for us, especially seeing a dream that when I talked to Jeremy a few years ago, as he was having academy teams start coming up, going, these are going to be the guys that are going to be playing for us in a few years, and seeing some of those guys making those steps and playing with the first team, it's just amazing to be able to watch and be a part of.
And that's actually a key part of what we wanted to discuss about the Lansing City team. You mentioned the players that have come up from the youth and the skill level. And, at the beginning of the season, there was a lot of marks in the L column, some kind of immature mistakes going on. I mean, a lot of goals you guys have given up have just been kind of bad giveaways, missed opportunities, even from the goalkeeper position, whether it be you or Castaneda. So we wanted to chat with you about, it seems like with the youth and the talent and what we've seen from the young players, how they've grown in the season. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Because, I think Ethan Castaneda is a great example. Your counterpart in goal. The last game that he played, he was out of his mind in the best way. He was coming out, making all. And I think this is the kind of growth we're seeing from players that are, 16, 17, 18, a lot of those players. So tell us about that, these youth guys and the growth you've seen over this year.
Yeah, I think right. So I think for us, we had two things going for us, kind of against us, that we knew were going to be, I don't want to say negatives because it was in the plans, but we knew were going to be hurdles that we were going to have to take. So we recognized that getting wins early in the season was going to be hard. And the hopes was that as the season progressed, that we would be able to have that. And those two things were, one was our age. Right. And so I think there might be some teams that have younger median ages, but that's because I push our age way up. But so we have a lot of younger players.
I said something about that on one of the games. I was talking about who the oldest player in the league was, and then you were playing and you got the ball, and I was like, actually, guys, I'm pretty sure it's Conrad, so I'm very sorry about
But something that's interesting when you talk about that, you talk about, you're one of the oldest players in the league, but right now you're playing the best of your life. Yeah. Right. And we think about that development. So how has that been something you've been able to do to play?
Yeah. And I think for me, right, it's kind of that same thing I was going to say the second part, right? So we have our age. And then the second thing was we have those players that are transitioning or have been transitioning over the last year or two from soccer to playing futsal. So we think of somebody like Josh, right? Or Trezor. Or Jonah, right? Guys who played very well soccer outside that we're trying to put onto a futsal court, and we're telling them, whatever you did outside, forget it. We're going to rebuild you into a futsal player, right? And I kind of say that tongue in cheek because there are some, right? We kick the ball, you receive the ball, right? Those types of things. And so we knew that we were going to be starting at a certain level. And I think for me, it's been that same way. So that some of it is just a maturity and not age, but being on a court, playing, recognizing that, having confidence, right? Playing guys, right? That you see our young guys train with a guy who has traveled around the world at the highest level of futsal, playing in a World Cup, and then we go somewhere and we cower. Right. And so I think you see that maturity level beginning to change, number one, of saying we can play. And so we knew we were going to have to play and have some, even those games where we had losses. Right. And I know, mistake by, I look back at the Ole game and that could have been so different. There's two moments. One was mine. And another one was a corner kick where our guys were all looking around. Ole kicks it in and we know that they're going to be on their game on set pieces. That's two goals that we should have done better on. And that changes the game. And so when we look back at our losses, it's not like we're getting blown out. It's one or two mistakes, and it changes the game, the result. And so I think what we've seen over these last times, even the difference in Jenga, I think Jenga played probably about the same as when we played them there. The difference was how we played. And I think just tactically, we were probably at level 1 when we went down to Cincinnati. We weren't really confident, right? When it started with Ethan in goal and all the way through. I think that was the first game that I stepped in there, and some of that was just, hey, we need to make sure that his confidence doesn't just end right here.
Yeah.
So it's a process that we've been working on all year, and we're going to continue to do so. But just seeing the confidence in our players this last time when we played Jenk. And this last time when we played Detroit Imperial, that it's just a different group. Even the last time when we played Midwest, right? The first time we played Midwest the first time, and we spotted them 6 goals.
Yeah,
right?
I think it was 06.
I think we
in the first 5 minutes or something.
That's trouble if you're playing in the park, right?
Oh,
right? So
you guys only lost by 2.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought it back in dramatic fashion, almost.
So I think some of those are maturity level things that we're getting, and I hope that we can continue to take those steps. For us, that's been here's how we're going to mark our season, and it's a great testament to our guys who've stuck with the process. And when we said, hey, we're not going to worry about wins or losses. Wins or losses get to be that for us that topping on the cake, right? We're going to eat cake without toppings, and it's going to be good because it's cake. And if we do this right, we get to have a little bit of frosting on top.
As long as you like cake.
As long as you like cake.
I like cake. So
I don't know if there's a question here, but I have to say it because Conrad is one of the reasons that I fell in love with futsal.
Oh, wow.
So I got to go to the open tryout at Lansing City. Josh Robeson was there, and Conrad just happened to be stepping into goal, not knowing that he was even going to be playing the scenes, like, just here. And to see the cat-like reflexes, to see the jumping and diving, I was completely immersed and just completely bought into being a fan, not only of Lansing City, but of you. And so I guess let me make a question here, because how do you do it, especially when we think about you're the oldest goalkeeper in the league, but yet you look like the youngest on the court. You're the most agile. I don't know if there's anybody else in the league that we've seen that can bounce and dive the way that you do.
Yeah, I think I'm maybe the most unintelligent person, I guess, to keep doing it. I appreciate those comments. And I think that speaks to what the culture that we're trying to build here. We want to play futsal in a way that when people come watch, they say, we want to come back and watch again. And we want to come back and we want to see more of this. But yeah, it really is. I enjoy playing. With these guys. And so, just that if the guys that I'm on the court with are willing to play harder for the person next to them, then I'm going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I know I want to. You actually got training here in about a minute or so. So we're going to get to just a question about this weekend. But before I do a couple of rapid fire things, I do see Davide DePoche in the chat talking about Forbes. I do think that he's definitely one of those keepers, and I do have to. I mean, he jumps around. I don't know if I would go as far to say he's the most agile in the league. I mean, I don't.
I'm
nothing against you. I just don't know.
Yeah,
just for what it's worth, I just got to leave right there.
I'd give that to Michael as well, right? I'm not doing handsprings and flips and all of that stuff, right? So yeah,
Michael
he puts
his body on the line.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, Michael's more agile by far, right? That guy, he's doing things that I'm never going to be able to do. So
yeah, and we're actually going to talk about a little bit about Forbes a little later. One of the players kind of to watch out for this weekend. But a couple of quick fire questions, and then we're going to get to the outlook for this weekend. So. First of all, your teammate David says. So this is a quick fire.
Okay.
Who's the best keeper in the league?
I don't know. We have some quality goalkeepers in there. I would say that. I think we go through here. There's some quality goalkeepers in there.
He's going to leave it at that. Quality goalkeepers. Have you ever broken a bone playing goalie in futsal?
Yes. And so actually, earlier this year, I think it might have been. It might have been one of our training games, a scrimmage or something, that I actually broke a finger earlier this year. And so, funny story, one of the first times I was playing with Josh, and my finger was twisted sideways and was hanging to the side. And so I went to Josh and I said, hey, can you pull my finger for me? Because I can't. I tried pulling it myself, and I wasn't able to yank it hard enough. And
so welcome to the team.
Yeah,
Josh.
welcome to the team, Josh. And he looked at me, and his whole complexion was really white. And so, Jeremy happened to be by. I go, hey, Jeremy, come here. I go, hey, yank that for me real quick. And, of course, he just grabbed it and pulled it. And so I was able to go. So that's my most recent one.
That's so funny. Cohen says, hi, Papa.
Oh, there you go. So, yeah, Grandpa. So let everybody know I'm a grandpa.
Grandpa. All right. Grandpa Gonzalez here. Let's see. Do we have any more questions? Oh, okay. So the last question, and then we got to get you on your way. So, you and Ethan Castaneda, the goalkeeper room for Lansing City. Obviously, a very young player, and as we mentioned, probably the oldest in the FCS. So, tell us a little bit about that relationship you have with him. What's it like when you are, pulling him aside, trying to, we've seen you kind of take him under your wing a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love playing with Ethan. And so, the more he can play, the better I think it is for Lansing City in the long run. And so I think that I've been blessed to be able to play, but like I said, I think the more that he gets to play, the better it is for Lansing City. I think you've seen his maturity over the year just begin to mistakes that were leading to goals earlier in the year he's not making. And I don't think it was skill level. I think it was just the mentality level, the psyche of a goalkeeper that with maturity will come. I think there's a high ceiling for him. I'm excited to see as he gets a few years under his belt playing and what he can do.
Yeah, I know I am too, and I could probably speak for Gerard to say that he is as well. I mean, that was one of the players that we kind of, I believe there was in the last game against Jinga, Lansing City, the young players of Lansing City all showed. I mean, one of the players that doesn't get a lot of, headline time, but has a huge impact on the game is Drew Barney. Yeah. I mean, his movement without the ball, if you watch for that, it's just he's spot on and he's creating space, and it goes unnoticed. There's no stats for how many times you move to create space, but as a team, you see it and you know it and you feel it. But Castaneda definitely one of the guys that we've seen kind of take that. So let me just ask the question directly. Do you feel like Lansing City has the highest ceiling for talent in the FCS?
I think ceiling wise, there is a high ceiling for us. We're not there. And right, I know all of us would love to say, hey, we're there. We're not. We've got a long ways to go, but I think we've taken steps. So maybe we've gone from, like I said, maybe we were at step 1 when we played Jenga, our first game of the year. We might be at step 3, right? Where we've taken a couple steps. For us to really be there, we're going to have to take 7, 8, and that's understanding the game and playing with confidence, playing with joy, doing the things that maybe the fans wouldn't notice. But we all notice that helps us to take that next step. So with Drew and like I said, our young guys, man, they're phenomenal talents, right? So I was just thinking about that today of the young guys that we have playing. Ethan's played in the highest academies here, right? In goal outdoor. Lucci and Jack both are playing with Midwest in the MLS Next Academy there. Drew and Elijah both were all state and high school players this last year. And so it's not like we're just pulling in any kids into the game. These are guys that have high technical ability that hopefully we can translate it into some high tactical ability in futsal. And if we could do that, there could be. We're young. There's an amazing growth that can happen here.
Yeah, which is probably amazing to say when you said you're 50, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, the team is young. This is great. I mean, what an amazing thing to say. I'm sorry, I know I'm keeping you a little long here, but I have to just point out real quick. You mentioned about, and you touched on it, but before we went on air, you told us you weren't even planning to play this season.
Yeah.
Tell us very briefly, how did you find yourself wrapped up into this one?
Yeah, so like I said, I had ACL surgery last year, and so I was like, this is it for me. And so I'm not quite 50 yet, right? So I'll be 49 in a couple weeks.
Okay,
so not
okay.
yet 50.
My bad. I apologize.
Close,
I'll take that one back. I rescind that statement.
Yeah, and so I was just going to continue coaching, and we held our open tryouts, and Ethan was here, and we had no other goalkeepers show up, and so I was like, I'll throw my shoes on and go out there, and I guess the bug hit and talked with Jeremy a little bit, and he's like, yeah, you can still play. And so I guess I didn't need much push prodding, but
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'll do it. So,
All right. So not an official unretirement, but you had planned it, and
Yeah.
you said, all right. Maybe it was his plan all along.
It might have been.
Maybe he had goalkeeper sign. He said, no, don't come, guys.
yeah, don't show up.
Turning away at the door. Oh, man. Okay, so last thing, and then we'll let you go to training. And if you get in trouble for being late, I can't help you. I'm sorry. But I was going to take responsibility for a second, but I was like, I don't think I want to do that. So game against Detroit Imperial this weekend. It's a big one. Could be a win or go home situation. What's your outlook and the team's outlook for this one?
Man, I'm gonna sing the same thing I've been singing all day, and we are looking to play well. And so again, our measuring stick is not going to be do we win or lose. Our measuring sticks is going to be do we play futsal in a way that is elevating the game, is enjoyable to watch, and highlights the skills and talents of us as individuals. And so hopefully we do that. And if we do that, there's a chance that we get to have a W and get to play longer, right? And I say that knowing that, and I know Detroit Imperial's the same way. We're all grown men playing a game. We want to keep playing, that we want to be in the playoffs. And so I'm excited about it. I'm sure they're going to come out ready to play. We're going to come out ready to play, and it's going to be a good game. So I advise people to watch. It'll be fun.
Yeah, well, I know we're really looking forward to watching that one. As we mentioned before, quite possibly the highest stakes for a game yet this year. I mean, it's probably the closest to a playoff game that we've seen. There is still, I believe, a chance for both you and Imperial to make it in to the playoffs, but winning here, definitely helps a lot, and losing is a big downside to that. So thanks so much for your time, Conrad. We appreciate you, and we hope that practice goes well for you tonight.
Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate everything you guys do as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we are going to go to a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to dive into the massive game this weekend, Imperial taking on Lansing City. So don't go anywhere.
Committing a crime so you can try to escape from prison. Bad idea. Going to the pod escape room to play an escape game with your friends. Great idea. Test your skill as an astronaut in outer space. Find Santa in Save Christmas. Or take a vacation to an abandoned island. Just don't get stuck there. The Pod Escape Room. Learn more at thepodlansing.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Third Half podcast by the FCS Live team. I'm Jared Kleppel along with Gerard Iscani. If you missed it, we just had Conrad Gonzalez of Lansing City on the show. Make sure you go back and watch that. You can hear a little bit about his journey in futsal, how he got connected with Lansing City, and even how he actually played this year. It wasn't in the plan for him to actually play, but it happened, and now here he is. I think it's probably safe to say the oldest player in the league at almost 49, 48 currently. So go back and check that out if you missed it. But now we turn our attention to perhaps the biggest game of the year so far, potentially a win or go home for Detroit Imperial hosting Lansing City. Not only is it a rivalry of sorts, but it's also, I mean, the stakes are huge. Tell us a little bit about this. It's not technically win or go home, but almost.
So Imperial will have 2 games after this. They play Midwest United and Ole, and those have been so far this season the 2 best teams. And so when we think about how many points can they take from those 2 games, they might not be able to take any. We don't know yet. But those will be really tough matchups. Lansing City has 2 games left as well, one against Ole and one against Midwest. And when we think about how Midwest played earlier in the year, we don't expect much out of them. They do have some new players coming, so it'll really be exciting. And February 22nd will be a date to watch because that will tell us a lot. And when you think about this matchup specifically, last time they played, so Detroit Imperial came to Lansing City, and they didn't have their full squad. They were missing some key players like Michael Forbes, Davide DePoce, and it wasn't a game that went in their favor really at all, and Lansing City had their way. And I don't anticipate that being the same, especially going into Futsal Sala, and that's a place where we know Detroit Imperial's style of play is really well suited for. Unfortunately, they won't have DePoce, which we know he's literally custom made for that court with his ball skills. But they do have Michael Forbes, and even though we had just talked about Conrad and his agility and really his reckless ambition on the court, I've said this many times and I'll say it again, Michael Forbes is the best goalie in the FCS, and he's going to be one of the difference makers in the game one way or the other. And one of the things that I love watching about him is his commitment to the offensive end. So it's one of the things that, in futsal that's really drawn me into the sport is that the goalie's not just somebody that stands in the goal and defends the goal. The goalie gets involved in all aspects of the game, and Michael Forbes really does that. And we've said it a couple times on stream that he might have the second strongest leg in the league.
Maybe.
And so I would love to see some shots from him, some rockets out there blasting away.
And I'm sure you'll get a chance to. I mean, the court size at Canton Sala is quite a bit smaller than the one here at Lansing City and, Grand Rapids Ole and the one that Jenga typically plays on, a lot of the courts in the league. But specifically, Lansing's home court, much bigger than this one. And, we kind of expect that to be a factor in this game. How do you think that the court size, how do you think that is going to be a factor? For those that are watching, maybe they didn't hear our discussion about court sizes last week. How is this going to impact the play?
We're going to see a much different Lansing City game, at least from what we've seen the last couple of times they played on the court, even here in Lansing City. So one of the things Conrad just talked about was they've taken steps and they've evolved offensively from earlier in the season. They were really step 1 against Jenga, and now they're playing at step 3. And we can see those creative elements from Elijah Vu, Drew Barney. They're starting to understand spacing and positioning on the court. And when you go to Futsal Sala, there's just not as much opportunity to do that because of how restricted and how condensed the court space is. Yeah. So I would anticipate a lot of high press, a lot of counterattacking. And when you think about those aren't necessarily, the counterattacking style isn't necessarily Lansing City's style. So how will they adapt to that?
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point. I mean, the way that Lansing City plays, they want to dictate the game. They want to possess. They want to build. I mean, as far as any team in the league that will break pressure and build out of the back. No one does it better than Lansing City. And one of the biggest reasons is obvious. It's 81 Jeremy Kleppel, because many times when he gets the ball, defenders have to give him respect or else it's going to be a 4-on-3. Not always. There was one time he gave it up. But, once all season long, that's a risk I'd be willing to take every time. But that certainly is different. And one of the things that we've seen from the Lansing City team, the majority of goals that they've given up have been from kind of immature mistakes and giving the ball away in dangerous positions, and I think that's going to be magnified on a small court.
It will, and I think that's the one caveat to all of this conversation is what you just talked about, Jeremy Kleppel. So one of the things that Lansing City can do when you think about futsal and the phases of the game, so phase one is really breaking pressure in your defensive portion of the court, and they always skip phase one because of his ability to beat the press. And so when you think about if he can beat phase one on Football Sala, they're going to have a tremendous advantage, because that would really be the biggest drawback playing on that condensed court. But if they're able to really keep the ball away from Jeremy and not allow them to beat phase one, that's going to be a struggle.
And obviously, Detroit Imperial being at home, they are, much more used to this size of court. They plan it all the time. As you mentioned before, they are going to be without Davide Depoche on that suspension from the red card. Davide, I saw you in chat saying if only you didn't get the red card. I know we really wish that we were going to see you this weekend for this big game. But actually another question in the chat was, who do you think is going to fill the shoes of a player like Davide, who's so important and pivotal and pivotal without being a pivot?
Yeah,
we saw this last game. It was very tough when he left the game. It seemed like there was no one really replaced him. Who do you think they're going to turn to this weekend?
As far as replacing him, I don't see that they can, because of the skill that he has and for what he does in the game. And that's why we talked about this last week. When you look at the Ole game with him and without him, it's a completely different game. So they're up 3-1 with him, and then they lose by several goals without him. Right, and the momentum swing, and so I don't think that there is anyone, and I think that that's something that Pierce is going to have to think about, of how does he adjust the style of play to where they can't rely on that creative ability to beat the pressure just by dribbling.
And on the other side for Lansing City, we talked about Jeremy. His impact on the game is enormous. We had this discussion before about who to watch for Lansing City, and it's Coach Matt Alashari put it like, it's who is going to take advantage of what's created from Jeremy. You can't really overemphasize that enough for his role in the court. Beyond just, his ability 1v1 and scoring goals, it's just, he has an impact on the court. But, we talked about Drew Barney, how he doesn't get a lot of time, on the headlines, but his movement in the last game against Jinga, it was opening up the floor.
So you do say that, but I think Drew Barney is an incredible asset to Lansing City, and I would say that he's the most impactful player outside of Jeremy, right? And from my opinion,
I think you have a very valid point there. Yeah.
Yeah, especially not having Jack Fisher. I think that's the other component of this too. Is when we look back to the Jinga game and we look at how Drew Barney played in that game. The elements were there and the skill was there, but it just was like it was just missing something. And I think that he's been able to develop and grow. And when you talk about going from stage 1 to stage 3, I think a big part of that is Drew Barney's kind of like stepping into that role, especially not having Jack Fisher being injured the last couple of games. Drew Barney's really stepped into that role of being able to be creative. So I had the opportunity to watch practice Tuesday night, and it was just really awesome seeing Drew's some of his cross-court passes on the money, his first touch passes, really excellent. And so when you think about who really takes advantage of that spacing that Jeremy creates, I think Drew does. And not necessarily that he's going to be scoring the goals, which he did score the first one last time he played, but being able to create opportunities for other players.
Yeah, and it's, when it comes to Drew Barney, it's like the small things are – a lot of times it's the small things. You can tell a lot about a player's experience in futsal and comfortability with the game and just their futsal ability not just like general soccer ability, but futsal ability based on how they receive the ball. I mean, are they receiving it in their own area? Are they coming to it? Are they receiving it with the sole of their foot? Do they pass to the correct leg, right? Do they make runs that open up the kinds of passes that, like the short diagonal or the long diagonal, right? Are they making these runs that are opening up the court? And I had a chance to kind of look back at the game and see just how much that happens. And, when you're commentating the game, it's hard to see details like that. But, I mean, I think I have to agree with you that I think his impact on the game outside of Jeremy probably is the biggest impact in a positive way for Lansing City.
Well, when you think about their first line and think about their rotations, Drew Barney is the only one that hasn't rotated out with Jeremy Kleppel. So they've had a few different changes with Jonah Timblow, Trezor Crispane, Elijah Vu, David Saltzman, Jack Fisher's injured. But Drew Barney's been the constant, right? So it's Jeremy Kleppel, Drew Barney. And so when you think about that, I mean, there's a reason why.
Plus, he's got those amazing yellow banana shoes that I always love to see.
Yeah.
Surprised he's not slipping around in
know,
those.
We have to mention, too, he can play without the shoes. He's proved it. I mean, he doesn't even need them.
One on each foot, too. One on each foot, too. He can do one on each foot, too. So, we talked a little bit. We've been able to talk about Lansing City, and Conrad is here to give us a lot of insight about this young team. Perhaps one of the highest ceilings of talent in the FCS, for their young guys. And, he clearly sees a lot of potential, and they're not there yet. Coming into this game, they're on a 2-game winning streak, Lansing City is, and the trend feels good if you're a Lansing City fan.
Yeah, it definitely feels good, and it's one of we talked about disparity and dichotomy and experience earlier, and it's literally what we're going to see this weekend because Detroit Imperial is not feeling good. They're on a 4-game losing streak. They haven't had their full team available for a game outside of, I think Olay they did, but now we have the red card situation. And so when you think about how much just change in the lineup they've had over the last 4 or 5 games, and then Lansing City's had a lot more cohesion, and the only real player they've really been missing is Jack Fisher. And so you think about how the two teams are on completely different tracks right now.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like we're seeing that growth from Lansing City. But for Detroit, it kind of feels like they have everything to prove in this season. I mean, they're on a 4-game losing streak. Like, just being honest, their wins are the weakest wins, that you can have. I mean, 2 against Midwest, who's negative 68 goal differential, and then Jinga was on the road, and that's been a win for most people. So it feels that like they're the defending FCS champs. You know what I mean? And we've seen moments, and they've had times where players aren't there, but it's like it seems like this is like it for them. Like they have everything to prove yet.
So I'll say this because you did ask a player that kind of fills the shoes of DePoche, and I don't think anybody does for them. But there was one player when they had a depleted roster, Paxton Trask. I really liked his effort. Peyton Trask. I really liked his effort and his intensity and his understanding of where to be. He was able to create some opportunities. He had really good defensive structure, and he was a leader on the team. And so I would expect to see more out of that from him without DePoche there. And I think they're going to need more just structure and defense. Like that's one of the things when you think about a lot of those goals against Olay is they lost some of their positioning and they just got caught out.
So, these two teams, one team it kind of feels like they have this, Luke kind of put it in there. Does Lansing City have the momentum? That's kind of what it feels like, right? Yeah. And Detroit, have been struggling on the as far as wins and losses go, and really we talked about this potentially being a win or go home game. Tell us a little bit about. We were looking at the standings earlier, specifically for Detroit. If they lose this game, it could really be an elimination for them.
It can, and so a lot of it does hinge on these new players for Midwest. So you have Jenga's currently at 12 points, and Lansing City's at 9. If Lansing City takes points here, they play Midwest, and Jenga plays Midwest. And as of right now, based on what we've seen, every single game Midwest has played this season, they lost by double digits.
Yeah, so except for one, it was by 9.
It was by 9.
It was close.
So we'd anticipate to see more of the same. And if they do, that means 15 points is potentially the margin. And when you think about the tiebreaker's goal differential, which depending on how many goals Jenga scores against Midwest, if they win, that would mean that Detroit Imperial would have to go and play Olay in Grand Rapids, right? And when you think about how Olay has shown up on the bigger courts,
Yeah.
I don't know.
They've performed very well at home.
They have.
Their closest game, I think, was against Lansing City. I think it was a 1-goal game
and then
at home.
When you look at how Midwest just played last weekend, that they played really strong, and so I would only expect them to get better, right? Because they were missing some of their key players last week, and so when you bring those key players back and the way they played, I just don't see a path for Imperial unless they win this game. And so for me, for Imperial, this looks like a must-win. So Lansing City, they still play Midwest, and then they have a game against Olay, and when they played Olay, like Conrad said, there were 2 goals that were potentially nullified, right? If you have, there was a mistake where the goalie let the ball in. It was potentially an own goal. And then the second one was they weren't even set for the corner.
Yeah.
And so when you think about those 2 goals, that's a really tight game. And that rematch is going to be in Lansing City where they play really strong. The fans come out and support. So if I'm Detroit Imperial, this game's more important. Not that it's more important to win
but to get
Lansing
into
City,
the playoffs.
but to get into the playoffs,
it's like
they need the points more than Lansing City does, because Lansing City has a lot more potential for points later in the season. But this is really the most important game for Imperial at this point in the season.
And particularly because Imperial has already played Midwest twice, and they have some challenging games ahead. If they don't get this one, so could be a win or go home for these two teams. As we heard from Conrad Gonzalez, winning is definitely not the number one priority for the Lansing City team. We were trying to get Coach Pierce from Detroit Imperial on the show tonight. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it work. Maybe we can have him on another time. I'm not exactly sure what their perspective is. I know that they love the game of futsal. They love to compete. I know that they're going to want to be able to to have a chance to defend their title. So I know that this is going to be a really key one for them to win. In your opinion, what do you think is going to be the difference in this game? Like, what happens for it to go one way or the other?
We've talked about a few different points, right? We talked about the high press, the counterattack, really like Jeremy's ability to break, to really like skip phase 1. And for me, what I think about is how is Detroit going to restrict Lansing City's ability to move the ball? And so Lansing City's not used to playing on the narrow court or the shorter court.
Well, that's what I was going to say is the first thing that's going to restrict it
is the court.
Is the court.
Yeah, and so if Detroit Imperial can play to their strengths and play to their home court advantage, I think they got a really great chance to walk away with the W. And it's really going to fall down to, can Lansing City adjust to the court size like that?
Yeah.
Not that we want to make it everything about court size, but
it's a big deal.
It is. It's a big deal, and it changes the way Lansing City plays.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and again, not necessarily knowing their tactics going in, and knowing that Jeremy has demonstrated that ability to really skip the first phase of the attack, and when we talk about beating the first phase of the attack, it means advancing the ball from your back court. And so just getting past the first levels of defenders and breaking into the front court. And when you think about that, he's demonstrated that ability on the wide court with ease. One of the things that we saw from Olay putting a lot of pressure on the back court against Imperial, they had to rely early in that game on Depoche to beat that, right? And so, Lansing City plays a lot different, and I don't know that we would ever see Jeremy Kleppel get into a position that Depoche would find himself in, because he would probably distribute the ball earlier. And so I think that that's the part that is going to enable them to beat that high press, is not only his ability to beat the phase 1, but to be able to have some other outlets to play off of as well.
And we'd love to hear what you think, those of you that are in the chat. Who do you think is going to take it this weekend as Lansing City travels to Detroit Imperial? Who's going to come out with the 3 points, or are we going to have our second tie of the season? While the chat is making their decision, What's your take? What do you think? If you had to make a call, what's your prediction?
Right now, 5-3, Lansing City.
5-3 Lansing City.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really get to the point of what the scoreline will be, but I do think that Lansing City is going to get this one. I think without Davide DePoce, I think it makes that choice a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
But I do recognize that Lansing City has had some, they have had troubles that could be magnified by the small court. When I had my time playing with Lansing City, I hated playing on the small court because it was just so much worse for us. And I wasn't even half as good as these guys that are playing right now. We just wanted more space for Jeremy, and I would go to the back post. That was pretty much my role. Is I just go to the back post. I used to play basketball, just post up as a pivot, and I had some soccer ability, but I do think with the growth that we've seen for the Lansing City players, I think that's going to translate, and I think it's going to be tougher than if they were playing at home. But I think they'll be able to take it out with a victory as long as they can, reduce those mistakes, because they can turn so quickly into goals at home, and away on this kind of a court. I mean, it's even faster than that. So let's see if anyone in the chat. Luke says he thinks that Luciano's going to have a game. What do you think? Hot take?
Yeah, he is somebody that can have a really big impact on a court like this, because he can score like just in an instant. I mean, at any point in time, he's really one of their most dangerous players. We think about the potential goal of the season. It was him tying up with a beautiful pass from Jeremy Kleppel.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of play that they'll need to be successful. To score goals, because the court's going to be really tight. So we're going to have to see some of those really creative finishes.
Well, that game is coming up this Saturday, 7 p.m. Our coverage is going to begin about 6:45 or so on the YouTube channel FCS. The FCS live team it's going to be on the Futsal Champions Series YouTube channel. So tune in. We'd love to see you there watching this game. It should be a great one. It's going to be in Canton, Michigan. Detroit Imperial going to have a home game with Lansing City. They're missing Davide DePoce, but from what I know, the rest of their team that we expect to see will be there. So really excited to see that clash go down. And we'll see if our predictions and your predictions in the chat are the right ones or not. But that's going to do it for us here on the third half show tonight. I'm Jared Kleppel along with Gerard Ascani. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Committing a crime so you can try to escape from prison. Bad idea. Going to the pod escape room to play an escape game with your friends. Great idea. Test your skill as an astronaut in outer space. Find Santa in Save Christmas. Or take a vacation to an abandoned island. Just don't get stuck there. The Pod Escape Room. Learn more